So this is one of my favorite parts of our time together. These are districts that have been to Proficiency Academy and went back to their districts and were like, okay, let's do this. And as you will see, I'm sure there are things that work, there's challenges that you go through, things you have to question and figure out, and it's really a learning process. So I just love this. I love seeing we're kind of up here talking about what things will look like and then sort of bringing it down to seeing how it actually, what it looks like in practice. So I hope you will enjoy it. So I'd like to introduce Cindy Durain and Jessica Kaplan from Norwood Public Schools.
So the very first Proficiency Academy that ever happened, one of my friends from another district who was a department chair and I signed up to go. We convinced a couple of our staff to come with us and sat in Greg's session, and we were just completely inspired the entire time, and we went back and stole all of Greg's slides with his permission and tried to work with our staff to get everybody sort of into a mini Proficiency Academy. So the first thing we did to get everybody was try to get everybody on the same page. We opened up with a very fun Kahoot activity to see what people knew about the ACTFL proficiency levels, and we were very surprised that people didn't know what they thought they knew. So that was, we had to take a couple of steps back, change on the fly, and do some more work with the actual levels. We also did a cool activity that I'll show you on the next slide, but to help everybody sort of internalize what a novice can do with the language, what an intermediate can do with the language, we really had people work as a novice to try to describe different things. French teachers described a crepe and Spanish teachers described a taco. The German teachers tried to describe some sauerkraut. It was interesting. So, and then to try to align what we say we do to what we actually do. That was sort of a bigger challenge for us. Getting everybody familiar with proficiency levels and the can-do statements, which have since changed since when we started. We looked at the videos. If you were in Greg's sessions this morning, the speakers, the novice speaker, the intermediate speaker, we looked at those same videos and we talked about exactly what Greg did. I was channeling him the entire time. And we talked about what our students want and what motivates them. And that was one of the things that really truly made almost everybody shift to, okay, tell us more. Because when we talked about real world tasks and kids needing to speak, and we asked people, do we do this? They really did a gut check and said no. We do a lot of grammar, and we do a unit about camping, which is super fun, but not sure that that's truly a real world task. Why don't we make it more about travel opportunities and things like that that kids can do? So this afternoon, I think Greg is going to talk about, if you're in the foundation session, setting targets. We used his cheat sheet to help us do that. We set our targets for each proficiency level, and we really just kind of jumped in using ACTFL core practices. We prioritized where we had to start and then just have taken off. So one of the things I will say about setting your targets, Greg said this morning, it's one of the most important things I think that you can do, and I will tell you that we used it to increase the amount of instructional time for our students in 6th grade. Because when our administrators, thank you, Greg. So when our administrators saw that kids were leaving the 8th grade at the novice level, they were like, they're here for 3 years. Why are they only leaving at the novice level? So it's still not perfect. We still need to add more time to 6th grade. We need to add more time to 7th grade, but we have a mindset now where people understand it finally at long last. So. This is the Let's Talk Tacos activity. Sarah Elizabeth Cottrell, we raid stuff on the internet all the time. She's awesome. But we got the teachers together and we said, you guys be novice level learners and you speak in words and phrases and make a list. You don't use sentences. And intermediate people, this is what or novice low, novice mid, novice high. And people were super confused and felt what was nice to hear is people felt very limited by the constrictions that were put on them, and they said it must be so frustrating for our students when they're at those levels, and it helped them get a better perspective of how to help the kids. And I know a lot of our staff actually did this at parent night, because parents will be like, well, my kid's in your class and has been here all year, and they can only say, you know, these particular things. So parents were like, oh, and parents, it actually helped parents get on board too with, oh, you guys need more time and you guys need more resources. So that was positive.
Next. It's the next one.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so what worked, what was successful, and why? I think really like the main thing was most people bought in because we discussed what are our goals of our program, and we decided speaking, the kids want to speak. So we all really believed in that once we had that sit-down discussion. I think as a department, we were pretty much all on board that that's where we were headed. We also felt like the motivation in our students increased because we were giving them real-world purpose, and also with the authentic materials, like I found in particular when we did a unit on travel and they were looking at different websites and they were like, wait, so I could book this hotel? And you're like, yeah. So the fact that it was like real resources that Spanish speakers use, they couldn't even believe that they were looking at that real authentic website. So I think I noticed an increase in motivation pretty rapidly just because the students were more invested in the authentic materials. We felt like assessing in the different modes helped to give a full picture of the student. I think it's, then they're speaking, they're listening, they're reading, they're writing. You're seeing all of it through these different modes. And like Cindy mentioned, it really helped to legitimize our program because we're aligned with the national and state organizations. So our district really respected our process as we were rolling it out and creating our new curriculum. It's not like we just decided on this idea. We're coming from research, and it's based on national and state things that you really can come back to and show that it works. We also felt like these authentic materials added rigor because it's a higher level. Everything that we're giving to the students, we're always trying to push them. And ultimately, we were able to add time to our 6th grade program, which was incredible because we were able to show with the amount of contact hours they weren't going to get where they should by the end of 8th grade. So therefore, we were able to add that. And hopefully, we will continue to strengthen the middle school program in the future.
So when Catherine asked us to try to talk about what was challenging, we just laughed because the whole thing has been super challenging. Trying to convince people to give up textbooks and what they've known for a long time has just, like, how do you do that? So, and we still have some stragglers who are holding on tooth and nail to everything that they knew. And we had to also convince people that we weren't sure if we were right about what we were doing. So, just sort of come along for the ride and let's see how this goes. And when you're not using your textbook anymore and you're relying on things solely from authentic sources, or our website on the internet is there one day and then all of a sudden it's gone 2 weeks later when you try to go back to it. So that was a learning lesson too. And people were like, I just put all that work into that particular assessment and now it's gone. So time, we don't have enough time to do what we need to do. We still have a ton of work to do with this, and time remains probably our biggest challenge. Constant PD, like every time you come up against something, you're like, what are we going to do next? So you're trying to find speakers to come in, and then the resources that our district has aren't necessarily great about allowing for teachers to come in. But this year we worked with Kim. She was awesome, came in and showed us how to sort of avoid those pitfalls with authentic resources and start to curate them. Some really cool tips and tricks that maybe she can share with us as we go through. the endless search for authentic resources, no matter what you're doing. I find it very challenging because I start out looking for one topic, and I find resources for topics I hadn't even thought about, and then I start like, oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. I'm like a squirrel with a bright light, like, and by this point, too, because we're still working on it, it's still a work in progress, some of the people who bought in at the beginning are sort of starting to be like, now when are we going to be done, you know? And the truth of the matter is you're never done. We all know that because we're here and we're committed and engaged, but some people just want to know, like, when is enough enough? And we have not figured out the grammar. We went to the opposite end and we were like, we're not teaching grammar, and then we got to the end of the year and we were like, oh, that was bad. So this year we tried to teach more grammar, and then we realized that that still wasn't enough. So, but we're trying to really stick with the principles of the proficiency model and teach grammar you know, not like this is the preterite and the imperfect and here's a chart and apply it, but I guess more organically. And we need a lot of help with that if anybody wants to take that on.
Okay, so what are our next steps? So I think like when we started rolling out the new curriculum, we started with the level 2. We thought, you know, that's usually tends to be our freshmen. So we'll start with them, we'll get a good program going, and then each year we'll add on. So I think, you know, like last year we worked a little bit with the level 3, but that's not done. Level 2, you know, is looking good and it's getting better. But as you probably know, as you revise curriculum, you know, you think of different ways to improve it along the way. So, you know, like even though the 2 curriculum is done, it's not, you know, it still needs some revising here and there as we're learning, you know, better practices. I also have worked on the level 4 myself a lot, trying to include like the integrated performance assessments and things like that. So hopefully, you know, we'll just keep on throughout the next year improving what we have, but also adding on at the different levels. One thing that we really need to work on is to provide effective feedback for students. So we're looking at like, how do you show them how they can move themselves to the next level? Like we have students taking the AAPPL test, and they give the students a report of like what they could do to score higher the next time. It would be awesome if we can figure out how to do that for our kids throughout the year, giving them feedback on how to push themselves. And then finally, just the endless curation of resources. You know, that's like the never-ending task, is just finding the good resources that we can use, and also finding ways to save them, like digitally downloading things so we don't lose them, creating PDFs out of web pages so that they can stay, you know, if the website link goes down or something like that. Sorry, I think I saw a hand up. Was there a question? Yes.
I did have a question. When you were working through like level 2, did your whole department work together to make every decision?
No, so we have usually at least like a couple teachers will teach the same thing, so it tends to be sort of teamwork, collaboration as much as possible, but it's not like every person has to say like, that's okay with me. Like, we kind of broke down like, I'll take this unit, like I'll do the hotel unit if you do the airport unit. So we tried to divide and conquer and then check in with each other and see if we're like liking what we're coming up with.
Can I add to that? Mm-hmm. We did at the outset share sort of a roadmap for everyone to look at to make sure that everybody was okay with the topics that we were sort of assigning to the different levels. So that was sort of pre-approved by the entire department before we broke out into, you know, people working on an individual level. Any other questions?
I think right here in the board.
Can I just ask a question about the time? Did you do all this in like traditional time you've always had? Or did your administration like give you some extra PD time or give stipends like for summer work or something like that?
So just for the video, the question is about time and whether or not we did it like during the school day on traditional time, or if we got any extra stipends. We got, at the very first year, we got a very minimal stipend. So we got enough for everybody to work 2 hours, which, if you're a teacher, then you know, you come in the room, everybody has their coffee, then this one needs to go to the bathroom, this computer isn't, like whatever. So the first 2 hours came and went, and they were like, well, you can't get paid until you turn in your product. Okay, so that took another 10 hours to create, but they've been great. So since we have sort of turned in the first product, the assistant superintendent holds us up as a model for the other departments. So for the last couple of years, we've gotten more of a stipend, but still only like 6 hours a person. It's not much. So people do a lot on their own time, which is the biggest roadblock to getting stuff done, because nobody has, nobody has it. Everybody goes home to another job or kids or just their life and forget it, So people who have been super dedicated to getting it done. But that said, that's why there just remains so much to do. We started, at the time that the high school started with level 2, the middle school started with grade 6. And then the following year, we got more time added to grade 6. So when we should have been starting grade 7, we were still working on, grade 6 and then working on grade 7. So this year, they're finishing grade 8. And then we feel like from there, we can take our level 1, we can, piece together our level 1 curriculum for the high school. We don't have a ton of kids who take it at the high school in level 1, but we didn't want to make that until the middle school had finished their trajectory. But I don't know if that helps, but no, it was a lot of on our own time. Yep.
Are you doing this with all the languages at your school?
Are we doing it with all the languages at our school? We are, except for Latin. Sorry, I know. Our Latin teacher does do a lot with the obviously authentic texts. So she works with the can-do statements for the interpretive mode, but she hasn't really embraced the speaking piece, and we haven't pushed because we're still feeling like if the other languages were better, we could be more of a resource for her. So we'll get there. We will. I will. I promise.
How do your students decide what language they want to study in 6th grade, and do you find that I'm trying to move back and forth? How do our students in 6th grade decide which language to take? We do mini lessons with the 5th graders, so our students will visit the elementary schools. We don't do it for Spanish, we only do it for French, because we feel like they walk outside their house or they turn their TV on and they hear Spanish. So we do find that has increased our enrollment in our French program big time. So they get the little mini lesson, then they just choose. And did you say, can they switch? We have had kids at the middle school level that switch. Not too many. If they're going to switch, they generally do it at the high school.
I'm curious what your high school schedule is like how often you see the students, and then kind of in addition to that, what do your formal exams look like? Are they midterm and final, and have you had to adjust those based on moving to the proficiency model?
Okay, so the question was what our schedule at our school is like. So we do a rotating schedule, but we do see the students almost every day. Just one of the blocks will drop depending on the rotation. So that's great at the high school level. And then in terms of our assessments, we are trying to go for the major assessments, all integrated performance assessments, which I found last year was hard in terms of grading, if I'm being honest. If you're giving, so say you have 100 to 125 students, and then you're giving that many writings and that many speakings and that many interpretive reading packets, it's a lot. It really is. And I think, at the end of the day, I just had to ask myself, is this what I want for my students so that I know what they're learning? And that was sort of like the way that I was testing them along the way as well. So I wouldn't want to give them a final or a mid-year that didn't reflect how we were learning. So it was hard, like in terms of time and getting my grades done, and it was definitely stressful. But I think just like, you know, you all are here because you want to like maybe change and try something different. And so for me, I just said, you know, this is what I want. I could give them a multiple choice test like everybody else, like, you know, the other subjects tend to do, but that's not real world. And, you know, I think it's kind of like you have to just decide for yourself what's most important. In the back.
While you were designing the units for each language, did you work specifically within the language, or did you do kind of cross-language units that you kind of tweak to fit what you were looking at?
So did we do units specific to the language, or was it for like all the languages? So yes, we were hoping to align our curriculum for all the languages, and that was like a main plus of why we wanted to do this. We had so many different textbooks, and each level in language kind of was doing its own thing, and we decided we really want like every student who's in the level 2 to have a similar experience. Like they're being graded similarly, we're asking for similar skills, and so we found that that was like a big strength of this new model where we threw out the textbook was we could all kind of be on the same page, and then that allowed for collaboration too. So maybe there aren't 2 Spanish teachers or 2 French teachers that teach the same level, but then the French and the Spanish teacher can get together and still collaborate that way. So we found that that was a real strength of the program. Anyone else?
Oh, yeah, do you have one?
Just for those of us who are trying to get there, do you have any of this public, like on your website or any?
So is any of our stuff public on a website? We had a Wikispace page. Oh, it actually might still be up, right?
Until the end of the month.
Until the end of the month, but I don't think any of the unit stuff is on it because we had to, our district then migrated to a Google environment, so everything's in a Google Drive, but I'm not building a website, but I will, I can share. I can give some links and share. Yeah, we ACTFL core practices were huge, and the content maps from Ohio were huge as well, because they have the 6 AP themes, and then sort of themes that you can do for each level underneath. And anybody else? If you're, yep, go ahead.
I'm just curious about sort of the process, how it changed for you in terms of grading, like what you were doing before and how it looks now, and then how was that received from students and also parents? I think that's a question that we get a lot.
So I think the question is about grading and how we were doing it before, how we're doing it now, and feedback that we've gotten from, so I think one of the things one of the things that's been really good is that our grading policies, procedures pre this were pretty solid. They were based on best practices, so we didn't really have to do you know, some big tweaks. I think one of the things that we still have to work on, because we do a lot of formatives, you know, formative assessments and summative assessments, one of the things that we have to work on is like the mini quizzes, getting rid of those and making them more proficiency based, you know. So when you just want to know if the kids can identify 10 vocab words, get away from that and get them, that's a shift we have to make. But as far as how everything's been received from parents and administration, I think we're finding that more kids are successful with what we're doing. Some of our kids who truly struggled with grammar, with just sort of pulling it all together, they're speaking. And parents love that, and the kids love that. And we're just finding that more kids are passing our classes, more kids are making it to that next level, more kids are sticking with it at the upper levels. So we just had to add a teacher, a .8 teacher to the high school, because 66 kids couldn't fit into our classes. So
And Norwood has traditionally been, I think, really known for that it like, oh, we need to cut a teacher, we're going to cut from foreign language. So for it to have one principal adding time in the middle school and another one advocating for more staff for the high school, like, we just feel like we have to keep going, and we want to because of the success that we're seeing. So I think it's been really positive. I know that one of the things that our principal who just left was asking us to consider was a grading system that was more in line with the proficiency the proficiency levels. So, you know, are you a novice? Did you make it to the, if your target was novice high, did you make it to novice high? And reflect that, like more of a standards-based report card. I just don't know how to do that when you're the only department doing that. So it's something to work on, but yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about it.
When you just started the process and you had to decide at what proficiency level your kids were, did you use one of these assessments, or as a department did you decide? Because I think our department has a hard time agreeing with things, and I think we would never agree at what proficiency level our kids are. How did you manage that?
So we set our proficiency targets based on Greg's formula that, are you in the foundation session today? Or yes, so he's going to talk about that later. And we have stuck to that. We have no, like, that has not moved, and just nobody can argue with it because it's math. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's what it is. So this many hours gives you this result, and if it's not this many hours, then you don't get that result.
No, but how did you set, like, you know, for example, right now, my level 2, what proficiency level they are?
Oh, so we, based on our contact, based on the number of contact hours that they have during their regular school year, we set our target for level 2 at intermediate low.
That's for your targets. What about where they started? How did you decide where they were?
So that, as they're coming up from the...
Just by the hours?
Yep, they're coming up from the middle school. Our target for the middle school is novice high. Would love for it to be higher. And we know that they meet it or not meet it based on all of our integrated performance assessments that we do with the kids. The teachers crunch that data all the time.
And one thing to add.
Yep.
I think another thing we did early on was we worked together to look at samples and just made sure we understood what the work of like novice mid, novice high looked like, so that we knew we were on the same page if we were grading something. So that might be helpful to find sample work that you know is at that level that like the department looks at together.
Okay, yeah.